is it? What is it?
With his mind on continuity, the way any epic playwright or filmmaker would be, Martin Casella's back, and he's wearing the same shirt as last week because that is how you do it in our business. And we were just having a fun conversation. Oddly enough, he worked with Zemeckis and Kurt Russell on used cars, and we just had a conversation about the art of buying a car. And I had a used car story. Pretty
Yes.
funny stuff. But welcome back, the man. It's post Halloween. I thought of you, Martin, over Halloween weekend because in your honor, I'm like, I should just watch Poltergeist just to, in some way, if it calculates to some kind of residual out there in the accountant sphere, back to you. What'd you do for Halloween?
What did I do for Halloween?
Scare trick-or-treaters? Did you go
Yeah.
as a
Well,
paranormal investigator?
no. Have you? Somebody did one of those AI things and sent it to me. I thought it was a real toy
Uh,
action figure, and it turned out somebody, a buddy of mine, wrote me. And he goes, that was an AI thing. Those don't really exist. But out there in the world, there is a great AI ad for a action figure. That is me with the glasses and the clothes on, and there's all sorts of little toys that come along with it. So, what did I do? I answered the door, handed out candy. Where I live in Albuquerque, we live in a kind of neighborhood where there are not a lot of kids, and but the kids got to have like 5 handfills each to fill up their little
yeah.
pumpkin buckets.
That's how
So
my wife did it too. She's like, I don't want diabetes in this house. When these kids come by, you start shoveling like it's an engine on a train.
yeah, that's
You start
exactly. They're
you
like,
know,
here's more. So, and that's what I did. As I told you earlier, bought a new car and handed candy out to trick-or-treaters. That was it. I watched photos of my buddy Oliver from Poltergeist.
I
The
saw those
grown
too.
man that played Oliver all those years ago. He went to the Poltergeist house in Los Angeles, and he was wearing a pair of pajamas. I don't know how he did it. Well, actually, I know Oliver's an amazing guy, and I'm sure he had the pajamas made for him.
Oh
They were
yeah.
a version of the pajamas he wore in the movie, and he handed out candy at the Poltergeist house.
So next year he's gonna have to talk to me to talk to my prop guys on a Combat Radio Christmas Carol so they can build him a tree that swallows kids.
Uh,
Like
have you?
maybe you can do a thing where you climb up and you slide down the tree's mouth and you pop out the bottom of the tree
Yeah,
like a
that
slide
would
and you
probably
get
be
your
good. Have you interviewed Oliver? I don't
I
know if you
have,
have.
yeah. Yeah, I
You have.
have.
Did he tell you the story about the tree and how the tree the take? I believe this is true. He and I have talked about it at so many Comic Cons and autograph things. Um, the tree got a little crazy and actually really did start hurting him.
Really?
So yeah, and he was kind of trapped in there, and they finally had to yell cut, and they had to get him out of the tree. So he wasn't hurt, he wasn't injured, but I think he told me that maybe the take that they ended up using was the one of him really yelling. So there you go.
For his life.
For his life, yes.
He's
Oliver Robbins is one of the greatest people ever. Last week he sent me for Halloween. He's written a children's
yeah,
book
he
with some
has.
wonderful collaborators, and yeah, Oliver's
Sunset
great.
Scares, we should point it out.
We should. Sunset Scares available anywhere where books are sold, I believe. And it's wonderful. And it's a genius idea, and I don't want to give it away because I think part of the fun of the book is finding out what it's about when you get to page 3.
I
So
saw him out at the house, and I wonder what the scene is like at the house before he started showing up and before this was available to like Airbnb it. And like I wonder if people knew and like there was some sort of atmosphere generated from that, or if now with everyone kind of pumping the atmosphere into it, if it's really starting to take off. But he took advantage of it, and I think he was even like giving out candy and stuff. Like was he
he was,
surprising people at the door? And
yeah, and he was giving out candy
yeah,
in his red pajamas from the movie.
such a
So
good performance by that kid. You know, it's fun to see the movie. You know, we were both
did you end up
talking about.
watching it again
I
on
watched
Friday?
it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched it. It was on. It was on between The Haunting and Universal's Dracula, so it was part of a pretty steady, epic lineup for Halloween. And then, of course, I worked my way as the margaritas kick in, Martin, I work my way into like the Vincent Price House on Haunted Hill, the things that are a little bit more laughable but still spirited, that I love, by the way. But I did watch it, and because we had talked about it, and it was actually nice to talk to you because you're one of the few people I know that know Toby Hooper, and after our conversation, it gave me a lot more to think about when I was watching it in a weird way, almost like a college class, because I was looking. It's funny. I remember Gunnar Hansen, the original Leatherface,
Mhm.
who we would always go to dinner at the Rainbow. And I remember him talking about how he couldn't connect with Hooper. Hooper was going through some sort of issue where he occasionally would become what some people would define. I don't know if this is the clinical term, but he'd be kind of a shut-in. He'd kind of keep to himself for times, at least as I knew him. And Gunnar was saying I haven't been able to get in touch with him. I wanted him to collab on the book. He'd come out with a really good book on the making of Texas Chainsaw Massacre called Chainsaw Confidential, which I will say not because Gunnar was my friend, but that's probably the definitive production book on it because it really is a day to day in the trenches, like detailed, like this is what I'm dealing with story. But he couldn't get in touch with him, and we were talking about how it reminded me, number one, that Gunnar years ago said Toby didn't like to talk about Poltergeist. So believe it or not, when I saw Toby, we never brought it up. I don't typically, when you see your friends, bring up their work anyway, right?
Yeah.
You just kind of talk about other things, and we would, like, did you see the Texas A&M game or stuff like that? But it occurred to me that I had never spoken. Watching the movie on Halloween occurred to me I had never spoken to Toby about the movie, not one frame of it. But Gunnar at dinner once said, he was, again, like everyone else, as the myth is perpetuated into a cyclone of bigger and bigger myths. He's like, I think he only directed one scene, and it was the scene with the chairs. And I remember that pops up on Friday, and I'm just looking at the brilliant execution of how that was done. And it occurred to me that I think was the only scene I ever heard Toby talk about actually on his own.
Mm. Okay.
So this is not very interesting to people listening, but it was fun for me to think about pragmatically as I'm watching it again. I'm like, God, the things people have said about this and the the whole element behind it, and then I watched The Haunting, of course, which some people say really was an inspiration to
Yeah.
both Toby and Steven on it. And that's kind of a pretty close to a flawless movie as well
It's
in its time.
fantastic. For anybody who doesn't know, that's 1963. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah,
Robert Weiss directed it. Julie
right.
Harris, Claire Bloom, a bunch of other people.
And the
Uh,
place is now a bed and breakfast. You can stay. That's the smart play. Like they're all doing that with all these places now,
yeah, yeah.
And the house, though, in Simi Valley, they didn't shoot any interiors there, correct? So they probably had to model the house to look like the set, I would think. Right? Did they do
Yeah,
that
I
on this
think they
place?
did. I know they shot exteriors. I got into a conversation with someone on social media a couple months ago. I was there for 5 weeks. I mean, that's a lot of the film, and
Yeah.
I think I'm in about 45 minutes of it. Um, I don't think they shot anything there. Somebody said, "Oh no, all that backyard stuff was out in Simi Valley," and I was like, "No, they built a recreation of the
Yeah.
backyard
Yeah.
on the soundstage. That was a part of that giant up in the air set that where we were all 10, 15 feet up in the air on on a
Don't you
soundstage. They built the set up in the air. So
don't you love how people will tell you how they did it, the
yes,
movie you worked on?
yes, exactly.
I was talking to Kakai Umpa, who was you probably know him. He was Spielberg's location manager on The Color Purple. Later
No,
went
I
on to
no, I
work.
wouldn't have known
I know
him.
the
No.
time. I know the timeline is different, but sometimes I think the alumni crosses paths at things. But he went on to work with Clint Eastwood, and we were talking about that. Somehow that movie came up, and we were saying if they had done that now, they would have just built the entire street.
Yes, yes,
They would have built all the facade houses, the street, and they would have done it out in Lancaster and created this fake neighborhood. They wouldn't have probably gone into a. But yeah, that stuff with the pool, starring my buddy, who later became Billy the Indian and Predator, Sonny Landham, for his,
yes.
30 seconds of obnoxious fame, as he liked to say, being, being rude to a young lady in a household. Yeah, that's pretty impressive stuff. And I like the set for this thing, the way they built that thing to turn.
Hmm.
Incredible. And I will say, of course, of many great things within the framework of the movie, Martin Casella is the best thing about it. I mean, obviously, he just draws camera. It's riveting when he comes
I,
on the screen.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's very kind of you. I happen to feel that way about Jobin Williams and also Zelda Rubinstein and Beatrice
yeah,
Straight. I think
yeah,
the three of them. I think that's this is just my opinion. I'm not trying to make anybody angry or anything, but
right.
that was I didn't see the remake, and I'm a huge fan of several of the people in it, but friends of mine who saw it said they did something really weird, which is the thing that makes to me the movie so special, the original Poltergeist, is it how important all the women are. And as we all
Yeah.
know, for all of us who saw, what was the name of that movie that came out a couple years ago that was about Stephen's life and how he grew up and he had
The
he had
Fablemans. Right.
Fablemans, yes, and his mother was extremely important. I knew his mother well, working with him for 3 years, and his sisters. And women are very, very important in his life. And that's to me what's so special about the first Poltergeist movie is that the two daughters are important. Zelda's important when she comes in
Yeah.
the last half hour to clean up the house. Beatrice Straight's important. Joe Beth is there for the entire time. And the women are really important. And apparently in the remake, they changed those roles to men and they rewrote a lot of stuff. And I
Well,
think that was,
no,
yeah,
finish your
go
thought.
ahead.
I'm sorry. No, no,
No,
you,
that was the thing to me that was so powerful about that movie. And when I go to autograph conventions or Comic Cons and things, and I get to talk, I love meeting the people at those events. And I love talking with them and asking them about it and why. And
mhm,
so many people say, "Oh, my mom took me to see that movie when I was a kid," or "We watched it with our family on television."
right.
And at one of the conventions, several guys, it was always guys, said that was the last movie I watched with my mom before she passed away because that was something that we saw in my childhood. And when you get down to it, that movie's about a woman who literally goes to hell to bring her daughter back with some very good help from about at least two other women that are involved in the story. But also, and that's to me what makes the movie so special.
When you
And
explain it like that about someone going to hell, I think somehow Bruce Campbell needs to work his way into a reboot. But I will agree that, the problem, I think sometimes when they do what's called reimagining, which is a polite way to say we don't have anything original, so we're going to do something over again, they just sometimes make a lateral move. They don't really necessarily, they make a change just for a change sake, so they
yes.
can have, well, in this one, Joe Beth Williams, and I think that's a mistake. If you don't have anything that is a significant creative upgrade, maybe you don't attempt the movie at this time. But the thing that's so evident in E.T. and Close Encounters and in Poltergeist is the framework of Spielberg's life affected the emotional content of his character and what kind of filmmaker he actually is. And you can see
Yes.
it in his work. And that's one of those unique things because he captures a very organic sense of family and broken family at times, which still
Hmm.
counts.
Yeah.
And it's really evident in E.T. with Dee Wallace and, frustrated to hear her ex is in Mexico. And that's pretty brilliant because that fabric to the movie itself adds a dimension that other filmmakers may just gloss over and you don't get the full impact of the film. I mean, what's good about, the movie itself, Poltergeist in particular, is that feels like a family that's under threat, which is why you guys come out as heroes. And then, of course, we
Yeah.
talked about the scene where you get damaged, the infamous cut, the Academy Award winning could have been moment where Martin's getting
Yeah.
slammed from floor to ceiling for about 4 days or whatever it
Yeah.
was, getting ripped up, and then something took about. Hey, that thing where they subbed you in for what looks like some kind of what was it when they did that scene in the mirror? Was that like some kind of animatronic or
That's a good description. Yes. About two-thirds of it is me.
yeah,
And then there is an yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's a Disney word.
Oh,
Animatronics.
they're gonna sue us
What
now.
it what it was it was I had to go through a very long day where I
Yeah.
had clay put all over the upper part of my torso and over my head, and they made a mold of me where I had to breathe for several hours through straws through my nose, and which the more people that I talked to who have been in other horror films had to go through very similar things, obviously. But for me, that was part of the fun and part of the adventure of the film. So what? Yes.
Excellent producing by Spielberg within that casting decision in that moment. I'm sure he calculated how that was going to go with you, which probably also factored in the final decision. He probably realized Martin will be good about this. Go ahead and do it. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So it's very obviously me when I'm looking in the mirror and the lights are blinking and flashing. And then the way it was originally shot was I did several things and poked at my cheek and did some other things. And then they brought this beautiful, beautiful I say animated not as in animated with cells and things, but it had animation to it so that the eyes move, the mouth
Yeah,
could open and close, the teeth could chomp down, the forehead moved around, and they had two or three guys underneath, out of camera line, pulling wires and things so that could all happen.
right.
And what happened was that when I saw that, I was told on set that it could only be done once. And once they pulled the face off and did all that stuff, you couldn't go back to one. It was impossible. And because it was my first film, and I was learning from the moment I walked on there till the last thing that I did, I kind of took a deep breath and I went over to the assistant director and I said, you know, I don't want to do this. If this is all being shot at a certain angle, it's you're only supposed to see my hands. I said, I can't. I'm not going to take. I can't take responsibility for that. I said, I can't screw this up. And he said, "Wow, okay, that's fair. All right, let's see what we can do." And I said, "We don't need a stunt man or anything. We just need." And he said, "Oh, all right." And so we walked over to talk to Steven, and Steven said, "Oh, I'll do it."
Yeah, I knew it was probably going there that was it
Yeah,
his hands?
it was
Yeah,
hands hands. Oh yeah, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
for years, for those of us who remember Blockbuster Video, when the movie came out on VHS, and you could go get those tapes at Blockbuster, and then even when it was on DVD, it said on the side of the box, "Watch carefully. Those are Spielberg's hands ripping the face off in the scary scene." So
What a
he
warning.
took my shirt and put my shirt and coat on, and there was some rings I was wearing, so he took those and my watch, and I got far, far away, but I could still see. And Toby was there absolutely
Yeah.
because that's the scene everybody thinks is sort of him, and Steven got down on his hands and knees, surrounded by puppeteers, basically, and they yelled action. Toby yelled action, and Steven just started ripping and parry. I went back and watched the scene knowing that more than likely we were going to talk about this. So I went back and he did something in that scene which I think I might have been afraid to do, which was really, no pun intended, he really tore into that.
Yeah.
When you go back and watch the scene, he's grabbing chunks of the skin. Well, he's the producer of the movie, so he knows what they want. He knows what the effect was that they wanted it.
Oh,
So, in my memory, Toby was yelling, "Yeah, keep ripping," and they just kept the camera running.
that
So,
sounds like something Toby would be saying.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And what happened was, uh, and then I think we talked about this before, maybe, but uh, before they did all that, I had to do the reaction shot, and I wasn't sure. And that's the thing I'm most proud of in the film and
Yeah.
the cutting of that moment where there's the noise is screeching and the lights are flashing and the blood's going down the sink and the pieces are falling out. And all of a sudden there's this loud thwunk, and then it's just my regular face
Yeah.
going, "Whoa." And so when they cut it all together, they realized 3 or 4 months later that it wasn't really a lapse in continuity, but what it was that they had missed a step along the way. So by that point, I was appearing in a play, in Los Angeles, and I had a very short haircut. Kind of like my uncle called them butch cuts. I think people call them flat tops too, but and in the movie, I had long, shaggy hair. So when they called and said, we have to do some reshoots, and I said, reshoots? And they said, well, actually, we have to shoot some new material. And I said, okay. And I said, my hair's real short. And they said, oh, that's okay. We saved what was left of the dummy and we have the wig. So we'll be able to put the dummy's wig on your head. That's why my hair looks so odd. And
You drew attention to it, buddy, where I wouldn't have noticed
Yeah,
until you
yeah,
did that
yeah,
just
yeah,
now.
yeah. When you watch it, you'll see it. And what happened was that so I went back to do reshoots. I think Steven was off. I'm guessing he was shooting ET by then. So I think it was Frank Marshall. It was 45 years ago, so my memory's a little foggy about
Right.
that day. It was either Frank and Toby was doing something as well. So this was almost like a second unit thing. And what happened was I was in a chair for about 3 hours that morning getting prosthetic device on one side of my face that could literally just be torn off, and underneath would be they had dissolvable packets of movie blood and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So I got all ready. They got my costumes. Never throw anything away till the movie gets released. And I went downstairs and the makeup people were like, "How's this?" And whoever the DP was today for that sort of stuff, they may have brought what's his name back. And Frank, I remember very clearly Frank Marshall was there. And he went, "Guys, you put it on the wrong side. It's in a mirror, remember?" So they had to send me back up to the makeup room and take the whole thing apart that they had done and then start all over again. And they had there was like a sealant underneath to, where the prosthetics were, and they hadn't closed it all, and so the little stage blood started coming down in little rivulets, and I was yelling that, hey guys, we only have three shirts. We gotta do something. And they walked around with the holding, like I was really, really bleeding. That's what it looked like. And we got there and it was all fine, and then they shot it in the mirror, and they just said, okay, based on what they had film footage that they could show me of what ultimately what it was going to look like, of where it was going to. So they said, yeah, you can go ahead when you're sort of picking away and sort of stubbling and pulling things. You can do
So
that. So,
here's my
yeah.
question. I just saw Frank, by the way, at a memorial service.
Uh,
Um, in regards to the supernatural, you can almost make any excuse you want, but can they turn the camera on its side and flip it over and then just shoot it and then flip the film for the
I
mirror?
don't I don't know. All I know is there's a mirror in the and I don't think they could do that because things would have been because it's one side of my face, and I don't think
Right.
they could
I
just
mean,
flip it.
because my first question is, can we do it can we sort of do it within the framework of the camera? But
No, it
that's
was
the
all
experts.
they had it shot, yeah, going in there. They're speaking of Frank Marshall, there's a little I think we call them Easter eggs now before we called them, inside jokes.
Hmm.
There's I think at the end when they go to the motel, and there's a sign outside that says tonight only Dr. Fantasy and his magic
Yeah.
tricks or something. And that was Frank. Frank was an excellent performer. He did magic tricks, and his nickname was Dr. Fantasy. So
All
that's a
right.
little Easter egg that's there at the end of the movie. Frank
Yeah.
Marshall, for anybody listening, was one of the producers.
Yes,
And
he was. I mean, that's exactly what you do in a situation like that, right? You go up top. If you're worried about the guy at the top of the movie, if he damages it, it's on him. And let's
yeah,
be honest, Spielberg could have that thing replaced, but he's the only guy on the set that can do it without repercussions, probably. But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
cool. It's a great. I mean, you probably have to sign a lot of that. You probably have to sign a lot of 8x10s of that moment. I'm guessing
Well, what
that
happened
and you with the
when
chicken in your mouth.
me with the chicken in my mouth? An interesting thing happened. I can't remember when we talked before, but I went to London Comic Con last year,
Yeah.
and it's very first class. Everything is done amazing. You're not in the ballroom of a local Holiday Inn. This is in a big spectacular place, and my appearance agent sent some copies of photos,
Hmm.
and so they made them, and there were no pictures of anything from that scene in any of the photographs, and
Matter of
so.
taste, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And this guy walked up, and it turned out he was a British guy who was an agent who represented several of the people that were there at the Comic-Con that day. And he said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. We need to get you that photo." And I said, "Well, I do have a copy on my phone." He said, "Send me that," and I said, "Great, it's gone. You've got it." And he showed up an hour later with a stack like this of the
Hmm.
really, really gross ones of me. And those sold out, by the
Of
way.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what people want from the photos when
That's a
you
good
go in.
agent. I was looking at it more and I thought, if they had at this time decided, hey, we're going to do a movie the way they do now, but was kind of seen as something you do not do in the 80s and 90s. If they were going to do a movie on the making of Jaws, Martin Casella is who you hire to play Spielberg, you know?
That's
Because you
very
look like
funny.
him just enough at the time where you could have pulled it off and you have the skill
Yeah.
set as an actor to do it. But I actually liked watching the movie after we talked. It was kind of enlightening. And, there's for me, it's first and foremost, it's a really good movie. And I'm
Hmm.
kind of emotionally attached to some of the people that were in it that are no longer with us. And we just talked about so much, you and I, about the tips that actually Toby Hooper did give you. And we talked
Hmm.
about Beatrice Straight, and God, she's good in that movie.
Yeah.
The whole scene at the table where they're like, this Casio is 2 years old and it's not yours. And she's like, I'm
Yeah.
taking this, and then she's just like, I'm coming back. That moment was just so well. I mean, those are masters at work in
Yeah.
that scene, you know, and the whole thing, just the entire, man. But I did like to look at it again, and it brought up your conversation, triggered a lot of thoughts when I was watching it a second time. But the overall thought was, what an incredible. We also talked about the Battle of Los Angeles that basically is the
Yeah.
centerpiece of the film 1941, which you also were on.
Exactly.
And what
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
great that's a great set piece for a movie. I remember thinking like that, like they should, like I'm surprised they haven't done that now, just in a different capacity, not so much in
Yeah.
a remake, but that moment of where Los Angeles thought it was under invasion and literally they're shooting at itself.
December 1941. The California coast. The Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor. A nation's heroes were on the alert.
Look, you guys, a Jap sub!
The dummy's right.
California could be next.
What did I shoot there? I don't know!
This is war.
Oh, God.
A country's honor was at stake. The lives of millions would be protected by a brave few. This is their story.
Excuse us, ma'am.
From the director of Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Stop that plane!
the most explosive comedy spectacular ever filmed.
What the hell do you people think you're doing?
Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, John Belushi, Lorraine Gary, Murray Hamilton, Christopher Lee, Tim Matheson, Toshiro Mifune, Warren Oates, Robert Stack, Treat Williams,
I can assure you, there will be no bombs dropped here.
Boy, that was fun!
Universal Pictures and Columbia Pictures present an 18 production of a Steven Spielberg film. 1941.
Sayonara, sucker!
Did they think it was UFOs at first, but they scrambled like the fighter pilots, and they were like racing all over Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah. I know based from some of the things Zemeckis and Gale, who wrote the screenplay for 1941, I think that was all based on, I mean, the war.
Yeah.
Yeah, the war was not here yet, basically. I can't remember. I think Pearl Harbor had happened by that point, maybe. And but there is that story of there were Japanese submarines
Oh no, they
in
were
the
off the
harbor.
coast.
They were off
They're
the coast.
they've
Yeah,
since
but
confirmed that they were off the coast. Now that we have
yeah.
a,
But
we're at that point.
it's so funny now because when you look at what that movie cost, and if that movie was made now, it'd probably be 300, 400 million, and 90% of it would be CGI. And every single moment of that movie was practical effects. They
Yeah.
built a house. For anybody who doesn't know, the climax of the movie is the family that you've sort of been following during the whole 1941 scare. They go back to their beach house, and I think somebody slams a door at the end, and then the building begins to shake, and an entire house was built. Of course, it wasn't furnished, and there weren't rooms, but it looked like a house on a cliff in
Yeah.
Malibu. And when they slammed the door, it was built on rollers. And the climax of the movie is the whole house. After everything they had been through, nobody got hurt. There was really no damage. Their giant, beautiful house rolls off the cliff and crashes and is destroyed. And that was all it. I mean, that was all real. That was a big giant house that was built on a hillside. So
Yeah. Jerry
yeah.
Zeismer, the AD, who wrote an excellent book called Ready When You Are,
Oh, I don't know
talks about,
that. I am writing that down. Hold on a second.
yeah, brilliant book. He was the AD for Coppola. He was the AD for Cameron Crowe.
Yeah,
Um,
Jerry
he
was.
really, he's
Yeah,
actually in Apocalypse Now, which was written by my old boss, our friend
our
John
friend
Milius.
John Milius. Yes,
Um,
but
uh, he-
Jerry was incredible. He was so much fun, and it was because he came to the office in the production offices where I worked on 1941. He had to come around all the time because they had to back when they actually had call sheets,
yeah, yeah,
paper call sheets that had to go out to everybody at a certain time. And the Chris Soldo, who was the AD, the first AD on that, or second AD, I recently I got reacquainted with him because of social media, and I reached out, and he was Jerry Ziesmer. Is that what it was?
Zeismer is how I say it, but
Zeismer. Yeah, he was the second AD on that film, and he's still around
yeah,
working
he
on
talks
films
about
too.
for like an afternoon, Robert Zemeckis directed him before it was Robert Zemeckis, and he was like thinking, who is this guy? Like he didn't know he was going to be this titan of cinema.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of stories that come out of 1941, and I think personally, like I always thought that's a great subject for a film. You know, that whole sequence, especially when there's like a pending invasion and there's like a level of paranoia. And like I said, I think last time, I have friends, older family members, some of which passed away, who one of which swore there were like pre-invasion signs, which I don't know how accurate that is, but he said there was elements that he stumbled across that would make you think that there were some amphibious actions off the coast by the Japanese. Not an invasion because they didn't have the logistics, but sort of like a reconnaissance. Like they think they stumbled onto like some things that they thought their whole life was like a evidence of Japanese reconnaissance off the coast, like in Long Beach, which would make sense, right? Because there's the port
Yeah,
down there.
the port.
So he swore by that. More on that in 1 minute. We're with our buddy Martin Cassella.
Okay.
We were talking off air. Martin's got a really cool relic from 1941. It's like a complete breakdown and storyboard. What would you call it? It's
The story production storyboards
product.
for the
Yeah,
for the whole film.
but
So
we were talking about how like that's the one of the most fascinating things is the stories are one thing, but the production notes. Like I love to see the production notes in detail on any film if I can get them, just to see. Like I was looking at Peter Cushing's old Hammer notes in
mhm.
some of the Dracula films and what
Yeah.
he was trying to think and what because he made all these notes in the margin. Like I love looking at all the production notes between the production team, the cast, even the informal ones that are scribbling because it's such an insight into what's going through people's heads. I mean, I would have loved to have seen the production notes on Poltergeist. I mean, that there were so many interesting personalities on that film and 1941. Those are two incredible. Well, used cars too. Another movie you worked on,
Well,
bro. It's
which
endless with you.
used cars was it was insane. That's all I'm going to say
Yeah,
because
yeah.
after working with Steven for a year, let me see if I can get all 78 to 79. Yeah, and then we did Raiders in 1980. Yes, that sounds right. And so in late fall, once I had worked on 1941, Stephen said, okay, we're going to bring you on to Raiders, but there's 3 months between. So in the meantime, he said, I'm producing a Zemeckis Gale movie, Used Cars. And it turned out my dad was the transportation coordinator on that. And as sidebar, very quickly, when my dad passed away 3 years ago, and we started doing research for his obituary, which the Hollywood Reporter was very, very kind to publish, my dad was the first person that ever had transportation coordinator credit on a film, and that was when the movie came out in 1980. And that was because he had worked with Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale also on 1941. They were the writers, and then he worked on Used Cars with them. And for anybody who ever sees Used Cars, the climax of the movie takes place in the desert when 100 cars have to drive through the desert in order to, I think they're trying to win a prize or something. And that actually was real. That was long before CGI. And what the work my dad did on that was so spectacular that Zemeckis said, we've come up with a transportation coordinator credit for him. And I believe he gets a single card in the movie. So,
It's amazing what falls under the Department of Transportation, which includes the Studio Courier Service. I mean, that's how vast the
oh
transportation
yeah,
department is.
yeah,
And no doubt on Used Cars because the finale is so epic. But that's a movie that I think is underappreciated. I mean,
completely.
I remember seeing it at the time and laughing out loud at that movie. Like that movie was just so outrageously fun, and just the way Kurt Russell is dressed in it, and he does a little homage to it, I think, in Big Trouble in Little China. He kind of bounces back to that used car salesman look when he
Yes.
goes into like the Chinatown whorehouse, and he's like, what is it? He's got that alias, Anyway,
Yeah.
Kurt Russell,
It's
brilliant, of
also
course.
it's also Used Cars because this is you and I have when we speak, we're both movie fans in addition to being involved in films. And I think in certain ways that because Used Cars had been developed for a while in the 70s,
Right.
and I think that movie is like a really hard R just between the language and the nudity, but you never think of the language or the nudity. But then when you watch the movies, you got those strippers on the car, and I mean the I think it's very 70s in its own little way. The movie was shot in the late 1979 and
Mhm.
early 1980, and but that movie's very of its period. Even the clothes. And whenever I do watch it, it's the very tail end of when guys had big sideburns, basically. It was great. I mean, that's what I did. I think that's what we were talking about before, between 1941 and when Raiders started pre-production. That's where I was off in Tempe, Arizona, working on Used Cars with Kurt.
Now, did you like working on Raiders, or was that like demanding? Well, of course it's demanding, but I mean, was it like psychologically demanding?
The thing that was uh it was very complicated. The thing that happens, I think most people don't know about or didn't live through that period, or you go to a film now and it has the names of 500 production assistants on certain films, big giant epics. Um, Raiders, basically, there were two guys in LA that worked at Lucasfilm, and when we were working at Lucasfilm, I was there, and then the two other guys who were there. And then when we got to London, there were two assistants there who also oversaw that. And when you realize how big of a film that is, uh, a year of pre-production almost, casting that went on forever, specifically, well, it was supposed to be Tom Selleck in Raiders, and CBS would not let him out of his contract from that Hawaiian. Well, I forget now. There's a remake now, right? So, but the character, they wouldn't let him out of his contract. So we were going to shoot like in a matter of weeks, and George Lucas said, "Oh hell, let's just get, Harrison. Let's just get Harrison." So, and they must have seen 1,000 women to play Marion, everybody and their dog. Stephen used to come in on Monday mornings with fashion magazines because they were willing to see anybody. And he would just circle pictures of models in fashion magazines, and I'd have to. That was far before the internet, and I would have to be on the phone, for days to big giant Elle magazine or Women's Wear Daily, going, "Who's the woman on page 45?" And then when you would tell people that was Steven Spielberg's office, they'd laugh and hang up at you. So, but it was difficult. It was really fun for those months that we were at Lucasfilm in North Hollywood, where the North Hollywood Red Line station is now. That was really fun. It was great being in England. I loved the 3 months that I was there. Kathleen Kennedy and I were very close friends at the time, and we got this gigantic rental that we got together. And Frank was there as well, and it was just great.
The casting worked out across the board on that.
Across
You
the
know,
boards. Yeah, the
uh,
cast is just
I
everybody.
mean,
Paul
even
Freeman and
yeah. Oh, Freeman's fantastic in it, and
fantastic.
Melina Freeman, told me once that he's like, they called me after I got the job and asked me then if I could do a French accent. And I was like, of course. He's like, I thought I was already hired. But then they said, fun fact, and you may know
Yeah.
this, you may confirm this, or you may debunk this, but my friend Jeff Conaway, who played Kaniki in Grease,
Yep.
or he was up for it, or in the conversation and said, I went to Steven Spielberg's house and had cake with him. And he said, oh, you'd be great. And then that was all he heard about it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
and I'm sure there's a lot of actors that tell that story, but Conaway went to his grave saying that with conviction. Like, not, he doesn't know ultimately if he was in the final three or the final 10, but he said he took the meeting. And, you can see the meeting happening. I mean, he was
Yeah. Oh,
on
yeah.
he's coming off one of the hottest movies of all time,
Yeah.
Grease,
Yeah.
and I can see him getting in there. And he was great. He's actually great in Grease, I have to say. Not just because he was my friend, and I mean he was a frustrating friend at times. I'll admit that too, but I loved him, but he is great in Greece. So you can see this actually being a real option, where the process. Sometimes you just, and I'm not saying this is the case, but sometimes you just have these meetings to try to trigger the next creative,
Thought.
strike of lightning.
Yeah. I mean, Karen Allen, they must hundreds of women came in and out of that office,
Yeah.
and famous, super famous models, you name it, people
Was
who had done one film a woman that was great in one movie that had just come out, she would be there. And at Lucasfilm, with the egg company, we had a kitchen because they made lunches for us, and that's where a lot of the meetings took place, so that people would be really relaxed. You'd be sitting on stools around a kitchen bar and talking while people were
what
making lunch.
she is the perfect blend of the right looks and toughness that is
Hmm.
believable in a way that is not so organic from some actresses now. She really did
Yeah.
strike you as someone who ran like a Tibetan tavern. Like you could see expeditions to find the abominable snowman stopping through that place
Yeah.
and her taking care of the wounded like it was an aid station after they got clawed apart by a Yeti. I mean, she's really good. And I remember seeing her in was it The Wanderers? Was that her first film?
I don't know if that was, I don't
With the
remember.
Kaufman movie with Ken Wall. I think that's where I first saw her, and completely different character. Completely
Yeah.
different character. I think that movie ends with her walking into a club, and there's a young Bob Dylan singing,
Yeah.
which shows the sign of the changing of the times, so to speak. But everyone in that, I mean, everybody in that, is so good, and just
Well, uh,
There was an there was an actor that I didn't realize was even in it that was later in Young Sherlock Holmes as the villain, and I remember thinking God, I'm looking at actors and I don't even realize they're actors. Like there's Frank Marshall pops in as the flying wing gunner. There's all these moments. Anyway, I'm blowing this thing up and I
well, then
apologize,
the
but
same stunt man plays the flying wing guy when they're
yeah,
having the fight and he ends up being shredded by the thing. He also plays the guy with the sword in the plaza that just gets shot. It's
Right.
that's the same stuntman. Yeah.
And then he comes back and he fights Harrison Ford in Temple of Doom. It's like the same guy had the privilege of fighting Indiana Jones 3 or 4 times. It's brilliant. I love it. You got to
Well,
love all that stuff.
and Alfred Molina, who's
Yeah.
the throwaway guy that gets killed at the very beginning. Indy, throw me the idol. That's Alfred, I think. And John Rhys Davies is Sala. He's the best friend who helps them. But Alfred Molina is like an incredibly famous Broadway television West
Yes.
End actor now with Tony Awards, and yet he's the guy that betrays uh, Indy at the beginning. He's the one that's impaled on the
Yeah.
spikes in the tunnel at the
Which,
beginning of the
by the
movie.
way, I would love to see like the production design, evolutionary ideas, notes, and like sort of fabrication dockets about, hey, this is what we're thinking for a temple and how it finally got to, and then there's a shaft of light, and it's like a Scooby-Doo thing where your hand goes out and it spears you. And by the way, who are these Incas to design this? This is like the craziest.
Yes. And
Like,
my question on the set was like, who reloaded them?
yeah,
Where were the people that reloaded those arrows after they all got shot? By the way, I don't know if you've seen it, but at the Oscar Museum, the Academy Museum on Wilshire and Fairfax, I don't know that I think they changed it. The last time I was there a couple years ago, it still was there. And in the sound exhibit, it's spectacular. They show you that whole sequence, about 3.5 minutes long, of him trying to escape, doing this, balancing and what they do is they strip it of all the sound. They show you the scene, and then they strip it of all the sound, and one piece by piece, they show you how they made that sound effect noise and how it was labored on. And then at the very end, they say, "Oh, and what would it be without the score?" Well, now let's watch the whole piece of film again, knowing how it was put together. And
amazing.
my favorite is there's noise when Indy's holding onto that vine and he's hanging and he's trying to get up and all the rocks are going over him. That was made by, speaking of wheelies earlier, that was made by a car doing wheelies in a gravel parking lot. And you see that they shot that footage, and it's an incredible display. If it's still at the museum, I recommend anybody going to see it if you're a sound fan of
Yeah.
how sound
Yeah.
is made in movies.
I
Yeah.
remember
Like
my
pigs
uncle.
being killed in The Exorcist. The squealing
Yeah.
pig sounds is, yeah. What
I
were you
remember
going
my
to say
uncle.
there?
No, I was going to say I remember my uncle Gene saw the movie and he was with Eisenhower's headquarters in North Africa, and I remember asking him like, "What do you think of it?" And he goes, "Well, it's quite a ride." I said, "Yeah, but what did you really think of it?" You know. And I remember he gives, this is the most bizarre answer you can get asking somebody about a film, and he goes, if I remember our intelligence reports, the Germans didn't have any flying wings. And I'm like, that's your critique on this movie? Like an intelligence report from like Iran in 1941 or 2 that says, and you're
Yeah.
like going, but it was interesting because I thought he's sitting in the movie and he's seeing that scene and he's like, did they have flying wings?
Hmm.
Huh. But
Yeah.
you don't ask questions like that in a movie like this.
No.
You just go along for the
No.
ride, which is fantastic, by the way.
As Stephen used to say, because the woman who was the script supervisor, Pam, uh, she would occasionally say, when they were doing setups and things, Stephen, this isn't going to match. I remember her very clearly at one
Hmm.
point. There's a shot tilted up in the Well of Souls, and she's like, "Wait, my photos say that there was a palm tree there the last time we shot up." And he's like, "If they notice that, we've lost them." And that was
Right.
that was that was the rule for everything, you know. If they're noticing that, we've lost them already.
Well, this is
Like
the di-
my big issue, I don't understand how Indy stays alive when he attaches his rope to the parachute or the periscope of the submarine. And then they show the submarine going underwater, and then the little map shows, oh, it went like 500 miles or something, and you're like, well, how did he
Well,
survive the
isn't there
entire?
an outtake of him holding on to the periscope that wasn't used or
Yeah, I
something?
think they
Somebody.
didn't use that.
And the only good idea I had was to was to hang on to the periscope and go wherever the Ark goes. And struggling to stay on it, sleep.
That was the joke where he's blocking the
hull, yeah.
But what the hell?
But again, that's where you're starting to get. I remember people saying that at the time, but the movie was so fantastic from frame to frame that
so
you got
wonderful that you don't care. You don't care about all that stuff. But little things for people who are interested in movies and things, like there's a scene where Harrison and Karen Allen go on the top of the submarine, and there wasn't enough footage, so we had to get a submarine in Long Beach and do retakes and we had to get the original costumes, and we had to find doubles for Karen Allen and Harrison to put on that stuff. And it was when they climbed down into the submarine, so we had to put all that. We had to go shoot all of that, and then there's a scene where they like are marched through the submarine and people are yelling in German and things like that. Well, the attention to detail in especially in Spielberg films, we had to make sure that all the people that we hired to be in that room, because we didn't even use casting. It was like, oh, hi, so-and-so's one of the Frank Marshall's secretary's boyfriend plays the German guy driving this, because it was like, hi, well, a bunch of us went down to Long Beach and shot this, shot what's in the movie, probably 45 seconds at the very most. And they said, I remember Steven saying, now all these people are going to be able to speak German, right? And we're like, yeah, you didn't tell us that part. And it turned out Patty's boyfriend could speak German. But then when I saw the movie and it was all finished, they re-looped it all anyway.
Yeah, like they put it through a squawk box, or there's so many.
Yeah, they put it in, so it doesn't even matter. And it's all shot from the back. So you see the woman standing in for Karen Allen being pushed or something. And it's amazing because you don't notice it. Anybody watching it wouldn't, in a movie theater, would never notice something like
Well, I love the detail, and it's like a striker because you see like the U-boat commander, and it's the
you see
perfect looking guy, and then you've got like a navigator, and I just remember Das Boat. That was the thing, that there was like a very enthusiastic member of like the former Hitler Youth turned into the Navy, who was like clean shaven, and he got upset when they played the Temporary song. Remember that with like in Das Boat and all the German like U-boat crewmen are like singing to it in English, and he's like, I can't possibly be associated with that. But Spielberg kind of captured the same feel in that split couple of seconds.
Yeah, a couple of seconds, and you know exactly what's going on, which is fantastic.
You can feel the direction too. That he's like, okay, use your tools to kind of like draw on this map, and he's going to come around, and he's going to look like the weary U-boat commander. Like, what is this nonsensical mission we have in the Mediterranean now? Yeah. But it's just so brilliant. And I mean, like the casting elements, like the crew, Katanga and his crew, every bit of that is believable in a way that, like the way Spielberg transmits the authenticity in those moments. And there is an art to that. It's just, you feel it. Like, it's just, even those guys playing the Germans who, and I know some of them, like Alan Austin, those guys, British actors working in England that got the extra. A lot of them were on Empire Strikes Back, actually, they said. Mm-hmm. And they're sitting there and they're like, oh, yeah, we're doing this thing. And we had to do this big scene and we don't get to see the ghosts that are going through us. We just have to, there's a light and we have to draw. Like, even those guys are 100% convincing. But in England also, the art of being what we used to call extras, and I don't mean it in a condescending way because I signed up to do that out of high school. In fact, Mark Rydell said he wanted me for a Vietnam sequence. But I think they call it atmosphere now. But even like that, in England, they take that very seriously. Like, that is your career. Like, you can be a career atmosphere player. Oh, yeah. And your job is to Shakespeare the shit out of that.
Yeah. Well, and the guy that plays the guy who has the imprint in his palm. The German.
Brilliant.
Very much. Perhaps we'll meet someday under better circumstances.
We meet again, Fräulein. You Americans, you're all the same. Always overdressing for the wrong occasions. What shall we talk about?
Ronnie
Yes.
Lacey is the actor, was
Yes.
the actor, and he was this brilliant Shakespearean actor. He and I got to be friends on the shoot, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, because I said, what if he goes, oh, I in some version of Long Day's Journey and Tonight with Laurence Olivier, I played his older son, and I was just like, my head was just exploding
No.
because they're
Finish. I'm
no,
sorry.
because there's these people basically playing the most evil Nazis that ever existed, and they're famous West End actors in London.
Yeah, and I'm buying it, right? Because
Yeah.
he's got that, goose stepping accent down, and just that, like, it's not just the ability to speak in a certain dialect, but the ability to like enunciate certain ebb and flow of evilness, which sometimes actors are tempted at times, not Martin Cassella, to push it and chew the scenery, but a centered performance oftentimes to me comes across not only much more genuine but also a lot more evil. It's what the actor's not saying and doing but may do versus him saying but Ronald Lacey, if you want to see a stroke of brilliance, look at him in Making the Grade opposite Judd Nelson and Andrew Dice Clay, where he's the hot dog salesman.
Okay, I did not know that. Oh my God.
Okay, where he's the hot dog salesman in Central Park that they get to pose as his dad so he can run a scam on a prep school. And Ronald Lacey plays that part. And Ronald Lacey also is opposite, holding his own against the best of the best in British acting society in Zulu Dawn. He is up there with Peter O'Toole and Denham Elliott and Bob Hoskins, and he does it. He delivers. But what I love about him is he's that master thespian where you don't know it's Ronald Lacey from one movie to the next. That's how good he was.
You had no idea. And if you sound like you know all the names of those actors and things. The guy who played the sort of secondary Paul Freeman Nazi super clean
Wolf Caller.
Well, no, there's a guy named Anthony. I think it's Anthony Higgins is his name.
Yeah, that's the guy that went on. Yeah, he went on to be. I think he was the villain wasn't he the villain in Young Sherlock Holmes?
That's probably who it is. Yeah, that's who it is. And in real life, the sweetest guy in the world. On our days off on Sunday, I remember one of the first Sundays we had a day off, and he and I got to be friends, and we were hanging out by the swimming pool. We're in the middle of nowhere in Tunisia at this giant, palatial hotel. And this is just one of those weird stories about synchronicity. And I had been reading a biography about E.M. Forster, and who wrote Passage in India and several other books, and Howard Zinn. And so he and I are sitting there, we're out by the pool and we're chatting away. And he looks at me and he's so not what he was like in the movie as that Nazi.
Right.
And he said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, I'm reading this terrific book about E.M. Forster." And he said, "Well, what point of his life are you at it?" And he said, "Oh, he just finished writing Howard's End." And I said, and I'm kind of an Anglophile, and I never read Howard's End before, and it's far before the movie came out. And I said, now I'm going to have to wait 4 months till I get back to Los Angeles, or when we get back to London, I'll go buy a copy. Ethan, he smiled at me. He reached down into his beach bag. He pulled out a copy of Howard's End and said, "I just finished this last night, mate. Here you go." And he handed
that's
me
great.
one. And so,
Great.
but that's the kind of things when you're on a location somewhere in the middle of nowhere on your one day off a week. So you had asked at the beginning about the actual shoot. When we got to Tunisia, I was actually supposed to be on set all the time with Steven because that was my job. I was the one who loaded all the cans of soup and everything, so he didn't get sick. Everything had to be from cans and boxes. Nothing he couldn't eat because we couldn't afford him getting sick. And that very Sunday that happened with Tony Higgins, I went swimming in the swimming pool, which we had told was chlorinated and safe. And about 3 days later, I was because I had to go and take there's a big giant place that we're at, huge hotel in the desert, but 20 miles away in a tiny, tiny little town, that's where we had to put all the second unit people and all well, you can understand that. And I was given a Jeep. So every night when we finished and redid all the call sheets, I had to drive 20 miles through the darkest desert in the world with no lights on a little dirt road. and go back to this tiny town and make sure all the second unit guys and the second unit crew got all the timesheets and the call sheets. And I woke up about 3 days after swimming in that swimming pool, and I was deathly ill and was sick as a dog for 4 days. I was hallucinating. I didn't know where I was. They had to send doctors over and nurses, and finally they about 4 days later, after terrifying my family, I called my family long distance and said, "I think I'm dying in Africa," and then I hung up the phone because I was hallucinating. And my mom called Lucasfilm, and she was shouting, going, "What have you done to my son? I just got this phone call." So, and then I got better. And at that point, went back to the big, giant resort hotel. And Stephen this is why I love him and still do after all these years. And people have asked me in interviews and things and say, "Oh, do you have, and they want bad stories." And I'm like, I don't have any. He looked at me that day when I came back to work. It was their day off, and he said, "We thought we were going to lose you." And I said, "Yeah, I thought so too." He said, "We were 10 minutes away from getting a private plane and flying you to London." He said, "You were so sick." He and we used to I called it the Midnight Express Hotel because the bed didn't even have, a mattress on it. It was springs and a light bulb, a bare light bulb that was swinging over me like that. And he said, "Look, you're not going to be able to go to location anymore because the doctor said we can't have you out in the sun." So he said, "You're going to stay here." And so for the rest of the film, I worked in the production office and got to be a part of that. So yeah, that was, and when I had to, it took a year after I got home back to the United States for me to get rid of whatever the thing that I had swallowed in the swimming pool was.
Right. Way to go, Spielberg, and way to tough it out, Cassella. Nice work, buddy. Higgins, by
Yeah.
the way, has that great moment in the film where it's a very subtle one, and they're trying to figure out like their lead to the Well of Souls, and he's like, perhaps the girl can help us. And like
Yes.
even and Wolf is just so Nazi-esque, and
Yeah.
he was our resident Nazi casting choice for about 3 decades, and he's like, my feelings exactly. Like they'd have this
Yeah.
conversation in English, but they still just know that their whole role is to be sinister,
Yes.
and it's funny because, I just picture someone saying cut and they're like, "Hey, can I get some coffee? I'm going to be here for a bit." And it's just like, but they just like click into these not perfect Nazi-esque, and it's smart because those guys do have an underling, you need to have like the other guy that suggests all the, you know, perhaps if, and some actor would be like, probably fight to pad his dialogue and be like, Steven, I should actually say I've served in like a camp to torture people and I'm qualified for this, but instead it's just the subtle, like get the mind of the audience working, like perhaps the girl can help us, and it's
Yeah.
great that it's just everything about that movie is beautiful. Like
Yeah.
everything about that fucking movie works. It's almost even today, like it's incredible. It's incredible. Like the layers of thought and just the way, like I remember like being mesmerized when they're walking by and all the Germans are eating at the table
Hmm.
and they're like grabbing them, like they're just so derogatory towards the native helpers. Like, yeah, get water, like pushing them around. Like even these guys are like the perfect Nazi fucks.
But even the monkey, that's the part I
Yes,
always forget. Every time I see the movie now, I'm like, "Oh, right, the monkey." And
right.
the monkey's like a Nazi, and then the monkey got poisoned, right?
Yeah,
He ate the poisoned dates that
yeah,
were supposed to be
yeah.
for our heroes. And yeah, and
And that actor who's in that little conclave is like, come here, look, it says, you know, whose Hebrew God this is. He goes in that whole tirade. The brilliance of the burned handprint only being
Mhm.
half the coordinates,
Yes.
like that little bit of film, the scripting of that is like where Lacey's like Heil Hitler, and they're like, oh, I think I know someone who can help us. He's quite skilled in these matters, and Heil Hitler. Lacey dressed in all black and like
Yes.
shaving his head so he looks like
Yes.
being that like guy and
Yes.
like
And
fanning.
he almost looks like a bat with
Yes,
he's got that big leather cape on, and
I
it
would have.
flies behind him like, yeah, oh no, it's
Yeah, I
just
would have
everything
loved
about
to
it.
ask him what it was kind of taken from, like where he kind of, don't you You as a master playwright probably have those moments where you ask an actor, look, I know you're 3 or 4 deep on the call sheet, but what did you pull for inspiration, to like for this particular, and I would love to ask Lacey, like, what was it from old Hollywood or the stage that you thought you needed to kind of apply in your role here? Because he does it so well. I mean, Freeman does it great too, but Freeman strikes you as a guy you could probably speak to. But
Yeah,
Lacey's like the guy you never have dinner with in that movie.
yeah.
You know,
And
even though
he's
he's
another one like hey, Anthony Higgins. That's just Ron Lacey was the sweetest guy in the world.
no
You would
doubt,
just sit
no
with him
doubt.
at lunch and just chat and talk and that was we this is totally a side tangent, but that was one of the things having worked in films in the United States where we're losing the light. We're doing this. We got to do that. We do. In England, everybody's really, really calm. And at 4 o'clock, the tea trolley comes out and everything stops no matter what you're doing. This was, of course, back in 1980. I don't know how it is now, but when we were there, it was like Nirvana. They
I
brought a
like,
tea trolley out and gave us all
yeah.
pastries. And Stephen, the very first time, was like, "What's happening?" And the British producers were like, "This is how it works, Stephen. You have to, the crew has to be happy, you know?"
And I agree with that. I love that aspect of it. I know James Cameron complained about it. My friends who were the Colonial Marines and Aliens said he got really frustrated and the crew rebelled over him trying to shut that down. But I do like it. If you know it's coming and you time your work around it,
Yeah.
it's a great morale boost. Plus, I think it's important when you work or even visit other people's territory that you respect the local
Yep.
traditions, of which that's a major player. The
Yeah.
tea, that's a big thing. You're going to see
That's a
cucumber
big deal.
sandwiches and stuff you don't want, but it's
Right.
like you
You
go
don't
with
want
that.
those, but the crew does. And the other
Right.
thing is that when on Raiders, that we had a shoot time that ended. It was 5 o'clock. They
Yeah.
we're going home. And when the
Right.
first time that happened, we were all like, "What?" And the production manager was like, "Oh, the crew votes here because they don't get over." That was then, once again, then they
Right.
don't get overtime. And Steven had to literally say, could we just, another half hour so we can get this shot? Would that be okay?" And one of the times they said no, but all the other times, Steven was so good about it
Yeah.
that it
I mean,
worked out.
just was it Mike Fenton who cast that?
I
Was that who
think
did it?
I want to say Mary, the woman
Was
in
it Marion
England.
Doherty?
No, the woman in England who did all the British casting was
Because
Mary
even the
something.
guys that walk
Yeah.
in with Lacey in that like Tibetan cavern or
Oh
that
yeah.
Tibetan like cantina,
Yeah.
it's like just the faces on those guys is
Yeah.
like, oh man, like these guys do look like they've been out hunting the abominable snowman. It's just
Yeah.
this is something that I think is missing in about 60% of the films today, that there's not the attention to the detail within the
Yeah.
layers of the scene and the people in it. They
Yeah.
kind of just put it up there and it's good. It's like a television, feels more like a TV kind of, bring them back alive, or Tales of the Golden Monkey kind of approach, where this,
Yeah.
everybody is like layered and there's like frost like baking off their coats coming in from the cold. And let
If you
me.
like, I want to say, if you like that kind of filmmaking, we went last week to see on the biggest screen we could find here in Albuquerque, which was massive, yeah, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and
And
it was I mean, on that, because friends of mine were like, "No, I'll watch it on my TV," and I'm like, "No, he put 3 years of prep into this. It's
yeah,
every detail is spectacular." And
he's
they
a
did.
he's another master, actually, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
And
it's not as I didn't think it was as good. Pan's Labyrinth to me is still the gold standard for his movies. That's just genius. But
starring our
yeah,
buddy Doug Jones.
that's right, Doug Jones, the Magic Man. And he
Everyone
was,
I know who has worked with him loves him too.
yeah,
Loves working with him, and I'm envious of that quality, because to make work of that magnitude fun is in itself an art form. It's hard
yeah,
to, you know, They used to call me Staff Sergeant Barnes at Warner Brothers, and it wasn't because I was nice, but that's interesting to see how people really flock to these directors, Spielberg being one, Toro, and just love the experience. I mean, he's unique. He's got a unique point of view that doesn't fit everyone's motif, so to speak, but
Exactly.
he's talented. I mean, I think, God, what a privileged career you've had, Martin. I mean, now we know why you're the epic playwright you are, because all these great talents around you who loan you the book, hey, here's Howard's End, who talked to you on 1941, experienced used cars with you, survived Poltergeist. Like, all of this has got to work its way into your processors, creative processors, to come out as these brilliant plays. Because I know when I do little script notes, and I'm working on a script right now, not that I'm a writer, but we have our Combat Radio Christmas Carol coming up, which I invited you to. And I kind of go through like a final pass of like, this joke out, this joke in, this joke doesn't feel right. And you kind of work through it and you realize what you're applying, or at least what I apply, is like some Xerox template of something real I experienced to get the voice of that character on this page. And it's usually, it's like, oh, this character sounds like this actor I worked with. And I'm just going to channel that bit of like wisdom and, sort of personality and into the page. I mean, that's got to work on some level with you in your work now. I think you should write a play about what it's like being a young Spielberg working on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Well, I was going to tell you about this because you mentioned something earlier. One of the first plays that I had done in Los Angeles that helped get me established and kind of get my career going, I wrote a script called Pay Dirt, and it was about the California Gold Rush. And it basically, I took my experience working on 1941 and wrote a 2.5 hour play about a day in the life of a production office on a giant movie by the most famous living director, which is wildly over budget. And
Brilliant.
I did, and it opened a lot of doors for me in LA. And as a matter of fact, as I think I may have told you once, our friend John Milius came to see it. He was a character in the play. But when John came to see it, John called me the next day and said, "You created the best portrait of Steven Spielberg I've ever seen." And I literally was biting my tongue because it was him, down to the character. You hear about the famous director of the film that everybody's working on. And then in the second act, you meet him, and he's only in 2 very short scenes, but he enters wearing full camo, and he's got a blow dart gun, and he ended up like walking away with the show. Everybody, and he pulls the whole thing together at the end. His character that we've waited so long to meet actually saves the day in the end, and makes the happy ending of the play happen. So
I love those artistic choices, and I also love the Milius influence. Milius would sit there and be like, the Maasai tribesmen would paint their foreheads red and grab a blowgun made out of like tiki wood or something. He probably has one on his desk someplace, but he's a perfect guy to center. I mean, it's funny because a lot's made of John Milius. I remember he would tell me in his office, "I don't like to do interviews because I come across as some fascist," and he wasn't.
He wasn't.
Which was
he was,
and that was but he was absolutely right by that, because I would read these interviews and be like, "That's definitely his voice, and he's saying those things, but it's not who he is as a person," and it's kind of tough to explain that to people. Plus Milius, as he had a very dry sense of humor. Like you'd almost like get the joke 2 days later sometimes that he was fucking with you.
Yes, and, always he would do that. Yeah. And I know I told you this when we sort of met and spoke, which was I was afraid to go to my play that night because it was so obviously John. And the guy who played it is a wonderful, brilliant actor named Nicholas Guest, who is Christopher Guest's brother. And
hold up, he's in a Combat Radio Christmas Carol this year.
Well, he's Nicholas now, everybody, but Nicky,
well, I still call him Nick. Yeah, of course.
Okay, everybody, he's got a lot of names. He was Nicky when I knew him, but please tell him hello, and
I'm going to tell him right now in a text.
Yes, go right ahead. You do that. But John, he, John called me, like I said, the next day, and he was like, "Oh my God, that was great. That was incredible. What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, it's almost lunchtime. Come over to Warner Brothers and have lunch with me." And he offered me a job at the end of our lunch that day. And I mean, I had known John for a while and worked with him on two different films because he also, I think he was an executive producer on Used Cars.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, he
and
was.
but I mean, it was.
I just got you here, buddy. Don't worry.
There you
Just
go.
settled.
I mean, friends of mine make jokes about that period of my life in Hollywood and how everything overlapped. And one friend of mine said, "You were just Zelig. You were there. You were there all these various times." And with John just I thought I was just having lunch with him. And at the end, he turned to me and he said, "What's your favorite movie?" And I said, "Chinatown." And he said, "Go find me a story like Chinatown, and we'll sell it to the Lad Company here at Warner Brothers." And we did. And that was my first professional job. It was
Yeah.
incredible.
The amazing thing about John Milius that stunned me is it's not, we all know the great movies he made. And when I was a kid, he made some Titanics. I mean, Conan the Barbarian, Red Dawn. These movies were
Big
big to us.
Wednesday is a
Big
fantastic
Wednesday.
movie.
Let me
Yeah.
tell you, that movie got us into surfing when we were 7 years old in Laguna Beach. And I loved that movie. In fact, he probably told you, he told me the story about when Elvis died during production and
No.
Jan Michael Vincent got shit faced
No.
at a party, and he just bought in this cherry red perfect Corvette, and Michael Vincent was in tears. He's like, "I'm so mad that Elvis is dead. I'm gonna kill my car." And drunk, Jan Michael Vincent kicks open the front door and just bang, 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 empties a magazine from a 45. Which, what are you doing with a loaded 45 at a party where you're
Exactly.
drinking?
Yeah.
But and he just empties the magazine at his car, which is maybe 8 feet away in the driveway. And he's just like, "Oh my God, man, I killed my car." And Jan Michael Vincent falls apart and he's devastated. And the next day he gets up, throws his front door open, and he completely missed the car with every round. He like silhouetted it. He couldn't even hit the car. He was so drunk he couldn't hit a car 8 feet in front of him. But he was telling a story. The thing about Milius that I love is he actually is amazingly endearing and creative. But you'd go into his office, and it was all the scripts he hadn't made that were captivating. The Sante Raid, Daniel Boone.
Yep.
He had Viking stories, and he wanted to do Genghis Khan. And I'm just like, man, this is just so incredible. And he had such a clever, after I stopped working for him, I got my own office at Warner Brothers. We were in the same building as the George Lopez show. And Milius is walking one day. One of the things that actually brought me down as I was reading that book, what is it? Easy Riders, Raging Bulls.
Yeah. Raging Bulls, yeah.
A super fun book to read. A copy showed up at his office because he's mentioned in it quite a bit. So is Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
And Leonard, John Milius' assistant, goes, "Get rid of that. Recycle that. He doesn't want to see that." And I had read a rough copy of it. And I said, "This is actually a really fun book to read." I don't know how condescending it is to Milius. I don't know that he needs to really be upset about it, but Milius sees it and he goes, "Get that out of here." And so I keep it. And one morning I'm across from the Starbucks, which is now the whole Friends Central Perk thing, or was at that time. And I'm going through the book and I see him walking and he's like, "What are you reading?" And I'm just like, "Oh shit." And he walks up and it's that book and he sees that and he's just like, Peter Biskind wrote the book, I think. And he's like, "This guy just wrote this book because he wasn't there. He did not live it. He just wrote this trash because," and I just felt so embarrassed, like I'd let him down. I was like, "Oh my God, my stock is dropping in this very conversation." But later I'm in my own office and I'm outside. I see him and I'm like, "Hey, John, come over here." My wife had given me a big Wednesday poster for my birthday and for the wall of the office. And you're right. That is a real heartfelt. He is the only filmmaker who could have delivered that movie that way.
Yeah.
And if you surf or grew up at the beach, which we did, I was 7 when the movie came out and started to surf. That is sort of one of the cultural points a lot of us point to as being right. It's like that, the feel of that. But he, and I think he's actually in one of those photographs in the beginning, one of those black and whites.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I talked to Sean Thompson, the world surf champion, about the movie, and he was telling me he could not do it because he was on some tour or something, but his friends, he was talking about his friends who worked on it and how they all love Ian Carnes and all those guys. Australians, of course, you have to hire the crazies. But I remember I have a big Wednesday poster, and he walks in, he walks over to sign. He's like, "Look at you." He's like, "You got your own office here," and there were people coming in and out, like the maintenance guys and everything. He's like, "What is going on here?" And I just said to him, I said, and I did it like the good, the bad, and the ugly, Eli Wallach. One bastard comes in, another bastard comes out. And he started laughing. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. There's one guy, maybe two on Earth that would have got the joke. And one of them is John Milius. And he starts like laughing like Ernest Hemingway about to have a stroke. But it was one of those moments where, you just click on such a low, like intimate, like comic level, like no one's going to get this, but we're getting it. And it's fucking hilarious to us. Why do things work that way in comedy? I don't know. You're the writer, Martin.
Yeah, because what's funny is what's true. And that's why our favorite stand-up comedians and all that, they're basically just saying true things that they observe.
True. That is true.
And that's why this is a weird a little confession, but I don't ever laugh at jokes in movies or plays. I laugh at the setups because I think, you understand, because the cleverness of what a writer has to do to land a joke.
Yeah.
And I always know that I'm working with the wrong people when I work with collaborators and they're like, "Oh, we don't need all this." And I'm like, that's the setup for the joke. You just can't say a punchline. You just can't shout something and have the audience laugh. You have to set it up. There has to be a setup. And I have worked with people, especially in the theater, who are like, "Oh, we don't need all that. That's pointless." But that's what's funny. The truth is funny. Just before in Poltergeist, when they hoisted me, they didn't heist me. They hoisted me up into the air on those wires. I don't even think I told you this before. And Stephen was there, and it was because it was kind of a second unit thing, and so they hoisted me really high up in the air, and he said, "Well, see if you can move around a little," and only Stephen would get this, or someone that grew up in LA, or someone that went to Disneyland a lot, or watched certain Disney animated films. So I'm standing there, and he goes, "Well, just try to swing yourself around a little." So I swung out over them, and I shouted at Stephen, "Come on, everybody, here we go," which is the line at Disneyland on the Peter Pan ride.
Yeah.
When you get in and the pirate boat takes off in the sky, and Peter Pan says, and Stephen looked at me and he just went like thumbs up. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And because he got it. It's the same with Milius. They have I hate to, well, I'm not going to pick on anybody in particular, but over the years, I've worked with certain writers and it's like they don't even have any life experience. They don't read, they don't know. They just kind of see a lot of movies and write what happened in other movies. And
they copy what they like.
They copy what they like.
They paraphrase what they like. It's true what you're saying, because we went through that on A Christmas Carol too. We have some really great writers on that. A couple of Emmy winners, a bunch of.
When is that, by the way? What's it?
November 21st. It's a Friday night. Let me get you out here. I even have a discount on a hotel if you want it.
Well, I got family members there, so November 21st.
Good. Let me. Hey man, if you come out, I'm putting you backstage so you can hang with those guys. But and bring anyone you want. And actually, if you have friends in the area and you don't make it, or if you do, we'll comp them some tickets so we can get some fun people in the building. But, it's like we were having that meeting in A Christmas Carol where there's like Scrooge and Marley face off in there, and there's like an exchange between them. And the joke is Scrooge asks a question, Marley answers in a question. Scrooge asks a question, Marley answers in a question to get Scrooge to think, and then Scrooge finally says, "Why are you answering every question with a question?" And Marley's response after a pause is, "Why indeed?" And we were like, the writers are like, "Is that funny?" And I was like, "It's all in the delivery of how that actor does that."
Yes.
It can fall totally flat, or everyone can start laughing. It's like like if you think of like the iconic Marleys, Alec Guinness played it. Frank Finley was probably my favorite, but Frank Finley was one of my favorite actors.
I just watched David Lean's version of Great Expectations last
Yeah.
night, and Frank
Yes.
Finley is Magwitch, and he just is my favorite thing in that. And I love the movie, but he's
Oh,
just amazing.
I
Yes,
love Frank Finley in anything. He
anything.
recently passed away. I think he was rep by Ken McCready in England, and we always reached out and for interviews. We reached out for movie projects at Warner Brothers, and McCready was like, he can't do it. He's past that health wise. But
Yeah.
I mean, I loved him in The Wild Geese as the minister on the runway. I loved him in The
Mhm.
Three Musketeers opposite York and Chamberlain, and he was so good in all those. But he's my favorite Marley. And I said, if you can channel Frank Finley, that line is hilarious. If you do Marley, say the way some guy off the street might do it, it's like it's all how you intellectually interpret and reprocess and deliver something. Anyway, it is true what you're saying though. Like the laughs sometimes are in the fact, are in the way, in the nuance of the performance. That's
Yeah.
funny. And the thing I also, getting back to Milius, will tell people who may want to form an opinion without meeting him. He was he is still with us. Very
Yeah.
generous, very human, very open to anyone, and he also, in clicking with the sense of humor he has, he also knew if you were intimidated and would play on it.
Mm.
He would if you went into. I remember one of the feature development assistants says, "I know you work over there at night. You got to introduce me to him. I love all his work." And I'm like, I don't want to do that all day here, and then I got to go over there till like 11 or 12. I don't want. Milius worked like from 4 to 10. And I'm like, I don't want to, I don't, the last thing I want to do is bring you in there so you kiss his ass and we all get annoyed at you. And I look like the guy that made that happen. I don't want to, he's like, no, I just want to say hello. And real quick. So I walk him over to Building 81. We're the second floor across from Chris Nolan and next to Mark Canton, who Milius did not get along with, who ran Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And we're next to Mark Canton. Anyway, you could tell Milius's office, and you were probably there, Martin, because it had a sticker that said "Property of the Hells Angels" on the door. And I knock on the door, and for whatever reason, it's locked. I can't knock and open it. I always fire a warning knock, in case someone's taking a nap or something. And I can't open. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And I knock again. I'm like, all right, I guess he's not here yet. So we start to leave, and then the door cracks, and it's Leonard, and he's like, Leonard, who by the way is in Conan the Barbarian. He goes, "Oh, Ethan, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, I'm like almost embarrassed, right? I'm like, I brought a friend. He's a big fan of John's. He wants to say hello. These are the things you do to kind of keep the work environment kosher where you're at, And he's like, okay, come on in. He throws the door open and John is putting together a sniper's rifle on the desk. This is in the days when you could FedEx gun parts and no one would question it. And he's putting it away. And John does not even stop putting the gun away. And I'm like, John, this is my friend. He's over at Bel Air Productions with Steve Ruther, the guy who did Pretty Woman. He's like, he is a big fan of yours and wants to say hello. And John looks up. He's like, oh, hi. Shakes hands. It goes right back to clamping the sight on this thing or whatever. And this guy's visibly nervous and shaken. And John, of course, detects that. And so he throws the gun to Leonard. He's like, see how the sight looks on this. And Leonard pushes open the window to Olive Avenue and puts the gun out. It's like a scene from Targets. And this guy is starting to really get uncomfortable. Firearm, not loaded, but firearm in the office. And he's like, well, it's really, really, really good to meet you. I guess I'll be going. Like Milius knew like the silence would kind of amp up the tension in the room. So he's just quiet. And the guy's finally like, I got to go. And he's like, nice meeting you. Oh, Ethan, be sure you give this guy the speech once he's out the building. And I'm like, yeah, sure thing. And so I get him out and he's like, well, that was interesting. And he's like, what did he mean by speech? And I'm like, well, if you tell anyone what you witnessed in there, he'll kill you. And of course, that's just me piling on. It's a joke.
Right.
But the whole thing is a joke. And the guy still did not understand it was a setup from top to, not the gun was real and he was doing that, but he knew immediately. Like Milius he's got so much mental constitution that anyway, you know better than I do, Martin, because he's your guy. A lot of people have imitated him too, like John Goodman and Big Lebowski.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you when you see Nick Guest, you can ask him. I mean, he'll remember that. That was a while ago. That was about 40 years ago. But he was so happy. He said to the costumer, "I get to wear a camo outfit." And we
Yeah.
had and our set person or a prop guy went out and found him a blowgun, and he just is wonderful. Nick,
Yeah,
yeah.
he just sent me a
So,
text. I said you
oh,
said hello. The text back is great. Anyway, you should call him after this. You have a number on him?
I don't. You can cut this part out.
Yeah, I'll have
Oh,
to.
wait, I think I do. Hold on a second.
You might. I can
I
text it
might.
to you. He's an underappreciated talent too. It's funny people know him from The Long Riders or
Yeah.
where he replaced Jeff Bridges, who did not want to shoot Jesse James. And people forget that like the James gang were basically that time period's terrorists. So, but people remember him from Long Riders, brilliant movie. Sandy King, actually, John Carpenter's wife was the script supervisor on that. But um, and
He,
another Spielberg assistant, Mark Marshall, the projectionist, had to go down to
no,
Walter Hill's beach house when Spielberg it caught fire. Do you know about that?
no,
At some point,
no.
Spielberg burned part of Walter Hill's beach house down, and Mark had to go down for the insurance companies and videotape it. And he thought Walter Hill was going to assassinate him. But
Yeah. I
Christmas
think,
Vacation, right? That's the one everyone knows him from. Christmas Vacation is
yeah,
Griswold's
yeah,
neighbor.
yeah. He's
Go
no,
ahead. I'm sorry.
it's no, all I was going to say is Nikki was one of the few people that I've ever known in my entire life that could get away with just speaking in a British accent for hours.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah.
well, and then I found out why and where which his family, the background of his family, because his brother is it's Lord and Lady Jamie Lee Curtis and Chris Guest. I mean, he's a I think not yeah, Chris Guest is a member of I think of the House of Lords or something.
Yes, yeah.
It's some unset Hayden Guest, I think, was the hyphenated name for a long time.
There
So
is some kind of British royalty tie-in. I'm
there
not sure what
there
it
is
is
some kind
because,
of British.
yeah.
I think I remember reading recently Jamie Lee Curtis made a joke and said, "No, you have to call me Lady Guest. I'm sorry." So, but no, tell me what it is. It's a on the 21st of November. It's a Christmas
So
Carol.
it's a broadcast reading of A Christmas Carol. The script is revamped by some very, very funny Emmy-winning comedy writers. And it's all for children battling NMOSD and pediatric cancer. So we do a thing where it's Ron Perlman, Dietrich Bader, Robert Carradine, Clancy Brown, Nicholas Guest. It's a barrage of like hyper talented people. Vanessa Bell Calloway. And we just do this thing. It's a comedic reading of it. Mark Mann of ELO does all the music live on stage with the performance. Danny Elfman's choir backs him up, and there's
Mm.
like a live Foley machine, and it's all done at the Saban Theater, which is a beautiful setting. And then we have a silent auction, which is where I was going to hit you up for a couple of covers to Poltergeist scripts, and it's just a fantastic Christmas party. Basically, is what it is. It's just, and then a lot of the people who's who are kind of like event ambassadors who attend, like producer Rick Palizzi of The Simpsons, some of the Disney Imagineers, Kirk Hansen, director Ron Clements, who did Aladdin and Little
Aladdin.
Mermaid.
Yeah, yeah, Little
Yeah,
Mermaid and Aladdin. Yeah.
yeah.
I will track down this afternoon. It's here somewhere. I've moved several times in the last 10 years, so I know I know I have my Poltergeist scripts here
Michael
somewhere.
Bay was Michael Bay working in the Lucasfilm office when that was ramping up.
Not
I seem to
not the
remember him
one in North
saying
Hollywood.
something like that.
Not
Yeah,
the one in North Hollywood where we were at the Egg Company. I never saw him there. But he
yeah.
might have, I mean, there were Lucasfilm places in Northern California, two or three or four, and then now there's that giant one. But
Do you have some humanizing moment with Lucas? Because people, always say the faster, more intense joke that he's kind of disassociated sometimes with the people he's
we
working
always,
with. But
I know in England, he was around occasionally. The person I saw all the time that was from that was from Lucasfilm was Howard Kazanjian. Who was what I think the executive producer or something. He was around a lot. He was there in England the whole time.
mm,
Um, George often came by. He would say hello. Um, to humanize him, there was one night. when we all went out to dinner in London, and we went to a really fancy restaurant that Michael Caine owned, which was impossible to get into, and we had to we had to drop like 14 names to get there, and he was there at that dinner, and I think he was still married to Marcia, and I think she was there too. And I remember sitting across from him, and I remember he was very intense, but he was also kind of charming. And I actually don't have it on me right now. I will send you a copy of it. I have a photo, a black and white photo of myself, Kathleen Kennedy, and George Marshall George Lucas in a production meeting on Raiders.
Very cool.
And it's fun, and we're all just sort of chatting and talking in the picture. And the last time I moved, I came across a bunch of the things that somehow had vanished. I found them all in a box.
Do you see anything in Raiders? I mean, we got to let you go, but we'll get you
Yeah,
back for a part 3 next week.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're too fun to talk to. Your curse, not mine. But
this is a pleasure, by the way, Ethan. This is a complete pleasure, and
this is fun.
Yeah, no, I love your stories as well. So yeah,
I mean,
we got to live through this period of movie making in Hollywood that was insane and crazy and nuts.
Yeah.
And utterly memorable. I mean, everything.
I mean, my burden is, to some degree, is having worked with some of the people. My questions are a little bit different than what maybe a fan would want to know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes this better or worse, to be honest with you. But having like worked with some of the personalities, I'm always kind of curious at like the mental mechanisms. And that's why I was asking, like, what was the psychological toll on Raiders? Because we all know the production stories from it, but
yeah,
do we know the human stories that are like in between the hash marks, so to speak, that most people don't see? And I thought what was interesting is, like, I was going to ask you in closing, like, do you look at Poltergeist or do you look at Raiders? And is there something that sticks with you? Are you like one of those guys that's like, oh, I see the concrete, I see the fuel spill moving away the concrete of the sand on the set? Or do you have some moment that sticks with you for good or bad, or that you look at and go, no, that's a good moment. That snapped into place. What do you got?
There's two things. I do look, as I mentioned to you earlier, that the Pam, the script supervisor, said that stuff isn't going to match. So I always hear her voice in my head when I watch the movie when they get to the scene in the Well of Souls, because I'm always looking up going, is the tree in this one or is it the cloud? I do always do that. I have to say, this is kind of sentimental, but whenever I watch Raiders, I think about it. And I think I told you the story. The night I found out I was cast in Poltergeist, this connects the two, was when I was invited to go to a private screening where there were only 10 of us of Raiders at the Paramount lot about 2 months before it was going to open. And when I got there to go to the screening, I'd been told to be there at 7 o'clock. And I got there at 7 o'clock and there was nobody there. And I'm always beating myself up, and I'm like, oh, I went to the wrong place. How could I have gone to there's only one Paramount studio. There's only one screening room. And then out of the blue, Spielberg pulled up in his little Porsche, and he got out of the car and pretended to throw the keys to me, which was one of the jobs I did. Sometimes when the parking attendant wasn't there at our office, I would park his car for him. And we chatted for a couple minutes, and out of the blue, he said, oh, so you're in this play, you got great reviews, that's wonderful, and you're going to be in this movie. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, we cast you in Poltergeist, and that's why I asked you to come early today, because I wanted to tell you myself. And he said, you were the best person we saw. And then he smiled in only the way he could, and he said, I'm also happy that we cast you, because this is my way of saying thank you for helping us get this movie made. And then I mean, I hugged him. I started to cry.
Of course.
I hugged him, and that's who he is to me.
Right.
And then I got to go inside a screening room with 10 people and see Raiders in the first time. So that's what I think of when I see the movie. That's what I think of.
And did you stand up at the end of the screen and be like, look, Spielberg, Steven, now that I see this pile of shit, I have to rethink my involvement in
That's
Poltergeist.
right. This is terrible. No,
This
no,
this
no. I
this
mean,
Raiders of
we
the
were all
Lost
like,
Ark thing.
we were all speeding when it was over. People
Oh,
were just like, oh my God.
it's that moment when you know you've seen a hit and no one else knows yet, and you're like, damn. The guys, my buddies who were the terrorists in Die Hard say the same story. They're like, we saw it early, and we all came out of there and said, dude, we're going to be in the biggest movie of the summer. This thing's incredible. Those moments are gold. And a fun fact, a little footnote to this: that screening room that you were in, the big one, right? Was that the one you were in?
It's the one like when you used to
By the commissary?
all I remember is when you pull in, you go through the thing, you go in that parking lot, and it was way over to the left of the
I
parking
th-
lot, and there were lots of parking spaces there.
I do think that was the screening room where I met our mutual friend and your Poltergeist director, Toby Hooper, for the
Toby?
first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a screening of Toolbox Murders. That's where we met, and we maintained a friendship since then. But I think that's, God, man, like the way the universe spins, it's kind of unreal, man.
It's insane. And that's what I think of now when I watch either of those films. Poltergeist, I think of, oh, there's a guy underneath the kitchen where the stove is on the sink level, where there's the guy with the chopsticks moving the
Mhm.
steak through the non-existent grout. And I do think things like that, or oh, that's right, I had to do that take 26 times. But
Yeah.
most of the time when I watch it, I just think this sounds so corny, and but I've got to do such amazing things. I mean, I got to work for the most famous movie director in the world when he was at his lowest when Poltergeist was released, but or when 1941 was released. But we were already working on Raiders at that point. We were working on used cars, and it was it and I got to
Yeah.
I got to go to his house and watch movies at his house and hang out with him and be in London and ride to him to the with him to the studio every morning. The driver would pick Kathleen Kennedy and I up, and then we pick up Stephen. And that's what I've got to do with my life. And then being a writer, I've got to travel all over the world and see my plays done.
Uh,
That's my thing. That's my stuff, you know? I just found out a play of mine's going to be done in Prague, starting in the spring next year.
Congratulations. I'm going to have to
Thank
get
you.
myself a ticket to Prague.
Yes, I will let you know as soon as the
Martin,
date
do more
is.
in LA. Can we do more in LA? I got a great
Yeah,
director here who loves the scene. Stan Zimmerman, he was a producer on Gilmore Girls. Let's put the two of you
I
together.
recognize his name. Yeah,
Yeah,
Stan.
big enthusiastic stage guy wants to build the scene here in LA. I'm going to excuse me, we should get you guys in touch. I do love that you appreciate that about your life, that you
I
had
do.
these fantastic moments in time. I want to ask you a question though, real quick, and I know we're done, but this
Yeah, we're
came to
done.
mind. Did did the rumor? Like I said, I never talked to Toby about Poltergeist because I was actually warned not to. It's actually not in my nature though to talk to people about their work too much. It's more in friendships and sort of social settings. It's more about what's fun, not what you might be dealing with in work. Was that true? Did he not talk about or want to talk about the film after it came out?
I don't know because I didn't have any. I mean, I stayed in touch with the Spielberg people and Kathleen
Yeah.
and Frank and other people, but I didn't see Toby again after that. So I can't really answer that question, to be perfectly
Huh.
honest. I always say he directed a lot of my scenes.
Yes.
Steven shot something that was a second unit thing that I did, and that didn't even end up in the movie. And but I don't know because I got to work pre-production on Poltergeist for months before I quit working for Steven. And I love Toby. I was always so excited
Yeah.
when he was coming to our office, when he was coming to hang out. And yeah, he was he's a wonderful guy.
I wonder, like this bend in the industry folklore, if like I told somebody a year ago I was asked about that from a Toby Hooper perspective, and I had said I had never talked to Toby about it, but not maybe because I was warned not to, but also because I don't really care to sometimes. And I started to think, and I said I think some version of I think this whole thing is way bigger than it ever was. I think it's just one of those things now that people love to talk about and love to ask questions about. And I think at the time it was not such a big deal, but it's become a big deal. Like
I
a
think
game of telephone with drama, you know?
yeah, I think you're right a little about that. And I know that at a certain point, at least that's what I was told, was the Directors Guild got involved,
Yeah, they did.
and I don't know. I was never asked to make a statement. I mean, I've asked in people writing books about Steven, 3 or 4 of them that I've done interviews with, and my response is always, Toby directed my stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
for a couple days at the beginning, Steven would be there and give advice and things like that. But
But
yeah.
you would do that normally, right? I would do that. Even if I was directing the movie, I'd be like, Steven, what do you think? This is what I'm
Oh,
thinking.
absolutely.
What
And
do you
plus,
think?
Steven, it was Steven's idea, and
Right. And
I think
he's
he has a
producing the
screen.
movie.
Yeah, and he has a screenplay credit on it too, I think.
Yeah.
And
So,
he's producing the movie.
right.
And hell, I've done plays for 45 years. Trust me, every time I have ever done a play, there is a producer that was
Right.
putting up the money, standing there going, "Could we not have that costume?"
You know
Or
what captured that perfectly? Shakespeare in Love. When the
Shakespeare in
money
Love is
guy, the
perfect.
money guy
The
is
money
there
guy.
and he's questioning everything, and even Ben Affleck's character. The one movie I actually can say I love Affleck's performance in,
Yeah.
and he's like, "And who are you?" He's like, "I'm the money." And he's like, "Then you can remain, but
Yes.
you will be silent."
Yes.
And it's just
That's
like,
it. I mean, and we were and it was all being done, and Steven had just, he came off of Raiders, and it was just
yeah,
and he was getting ready to go do ET, and
right.
I I just it's so funny because I just remember that smile when
I
Toby would
wonder.
when he would
Yeah,
smile
that's.
about something, and he had that very warm, sweet smile, and he gave me great advice several
Well, let me tell
times.
you, man, when Steven Spielberg's on your set, you're going to get a lot more out of your studio,
Yeah.
than just Toby Hooper on your set. And let me tell you, I loved Hooper, and I knew he was coming off a very raw, epic, you know, uh, resume. But you're going to get a lot more. A lot of the barriers are going to disappear if Spielberg gets on the phone.
Yeah,
And for that reason
absolutely.
alone, you want him standing there. Like, even if you can say, can you call the head of such and such and get anyway, you may have been in the room, in the screening room. Guy Named Joe, isn't that Spielberg's favorite movie or something like that?
I was there 4 months. But yes, I was around during all of that, sending messages. He would have endless recording sessions on story with the
Yeah,
end of writer Gary Goldberg, right, from Family Ties. That's who wrote the script. And
right.
yeah, and I was there all the way through.
My,
I know Steven says that about it being his favorite movie. I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think it's a terrible movie. And it gives us a chance to see Audrey Hepburn just before she died. So it's, if nothing else, and I'm actually, believe it or not, people make faces at me. I am a big fan of Richard Dreyfuss. So,
no one's going to make a face at you here for that. If I mean,
oh yeah,
look, nobody's perfect, Martin. If that's your favorite guy, or if you're a big
I
fan of
love I
No, I'm
love
kidding.
Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss in, oh, what's his name? The orchestra movie where he was the orchestra leader.
Mr. Holland's
Mr.
Opus.
Holland's Opus. Richard Dreyfuss is so good in that
What's the
movie.
one where he played the detective who like plays Clue with himself to study his craft?
Oh, geez,
What
I
is
don't.
that? God, he did so many movies that were so
He's
funny though.
so many, and he's great in Jaws, and he's great in The Goodbye Girl, and yeah, yeah,
Um,
he's wonderful.
well, Mark Marshall told me a story once. I was asking about embarrassing moments working for Steven, and he said I was the projectionist. Whoever it was, probably Warner Brothers, cut him a print of A Guy Named Joe. And
Mm,
now Spielberg's office, I think probably when you were there, was at Warner Brothers. It was the old Sinatra offices that Donner took over,
mm.
right? Which
We
was
were off the
right.
we were off the lot by that point.
Okay, so
Yeah, that was before all that. We were off the lot.
yeah, our
The-
timelines are a little jungled, but he like said, they cut him a new print. I threaded up. He's getting ready to screen it. Martin, you may have been sitting there with him, and somehow I split the first 30 feet, and I'm like ready to think I'm gonna be fired. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be fired. And if you know Mark Marshall, he's the most sincere human being on the planet. Went on to be the production supervisor on Harry Potter when I was at Warner's. Love him. I could trust him with anything in this business. I could literally say, take this box to Hong Kong, this street, this back alley, knock on a steel door, and wait for the Chang Sing to open the slot, and you say to them, the Wing Kong import is here. Hand it off and come back. He'll do it. He'll do it.
Yeah.
But he was like, I split the first 30 feet of a guy named Joe, and I'm panicking, and I'm like, what did you do? I'm like, I just cut it off and got it through the machine again and waited to be fired. And Spielberg, he says, undoubtedly knew, never said anything about it.
Well,
and again, one of those stories.
He used to want to have screenings when we were in London for those 3 months. And so every Friday night he sometimes we got new movies. That's where I saw Blues Brothers. That's where I saw the movie Test.
Which he's in.
Yes, he is. And what would happen was that very rarely the British crew would just not come to the screenings because that was the beginning of their weekend off. But It was usually the Americans, those of us, Frank and Kathy and Howard and me, and sometimes the cinematographer, Doug Slocum, Dougie, Stephen always called him. Sometimes they'd come. And then we each got our own little, like my movie that I wanted shown one Friday night was Chinatown. And Stephen would always want a couple classics. And I said, well, which one do you want? And he said, I want to see Singing in the Rain. I want to show it to everybody. I want to share it with everyone. I want all the. And so I ordered it. Back in the days when at the studio in London in Boreham Wood, you used to pick up the phone and this person would say, number, please. And you'd say, oh, get me Fox House or get me MGM House. It was another world.
Right.
And so the print arrived and there were about 20 of us in the screening room because everybody wanted to see Singing in the Rain. And it was a great print and we're watching it. And all of a sudden it gets to the Singing in the Rain number and there's a jump in the film. And then it moves on to the very next scene. And Stephen jumped up and yelled, turn on the lights, turn on the lights. And I'm sitting in the back going, what just happened? And he turned to me and he goes, what happened? And I said, well, I don't run the movies I'm working before we watch the movies, Stephen. I don't run them to see if every inch of the film is there. He goes, I can't believe they sent this to us. I can't believe they sent. I said, well, clearly someone wanted that and kept it. So he goes, all right, I'm not blaming you. That's how he would always, he goes, not your fault, everybody. He goes, I apologize. We'll just watch the rest of the movie. So we were watching and all of a sudden the credits come on at the end. And at the very end of the credits, all of a sudden we hear the music come in and whoever had cut it hadn't replaced it where it was in the movie. They just tacked it on to the end of the film. So the film ended with Gene Kelly singing and dancing and singing in the rain for his 3.5 minutes that he did it. And the lights came up and I looked at Stephen and I couldn't tell if he was angry or not. He just looked at me and he goes, well, at least they put it on at the end. He goes, that's fine. Tell them. And then he said, make sure MGM knows that the big number in the movie's at the wrong place. So there you go. That's how he is. He's a good man. He doesn't yell or scream or get angry he's just very firm about things, and he's a lovely guy.
Artists respect the art of other artists and want the full artistic experience of their work for people who are seeing it. Yep. So if anything, he wants the authenticity of the moment there for you, and you got to give him his props. It's always fun to talk to Martin Cassella. He's our new favorite around here at Combat Radio, and as you can tell, we've barely scratched the surface on all these epic stories, but man, it's like, where else can you find an in-depth conversation on Ronald Lacey?
Exactly.
Where do you get that? Where else do you get stories about Higgins?
That's right.
Well, it takes a man who survived it. Looking forward to the autobiography when you write it, Martin, and you should do that soon. And hopefully, I mean, I'm not promising anything, but maybe we get Martin on the red carpet November 21st when we deal with the kids. That's right. Some Poltergeist fans can photobomb him.
Ethan, this is a pleasure, and I'm so happy we got to do this. I even will
Likewise,
say I'm
buddy.
honored to have been a guest and to get to know you, because there's not a lot of people I know that smile like Jack Nicholson. That's all I'm going to tell you, Ethan.
I understand Jack Nicholson is a lot more likable, but I'll take the comparison. I'll take the comparison.
You have that little smile, smile. So there you go.
I'll take it, and that'll be on the back of my autobiography. An evil smile like Jack Nicholson, or something of the like, Martin Cassella.
Something like that. All work and no play makes Ethan a doughboy. No, is that what it says?
That is what it is. That is what it is. As The Simpsons reminded us.
That's right. All right. Thank you. I'm gonna run.
All right,
thank
brother.
You, and I will get all that material to you, and I hope I get to see you soon in person.
Hey, man, let's make some plans. Let's get you out on the 21st if possible. We'll make sure you're glad you're there.
Okay. I will.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ethan. Take care.
Bye-bye.
They come out of darkness, sometimes with thunder, sometimes with lightning. Their presence means death.
The prison master is afraid of him. The guards were afraid of him. The town is afraid of him. Lucifer is coming for you. Rest easy, Jack Carr said in a low tone. You're in the final 30 seconds of your life. No quarter. No quarter. Kill all masters. Coming soon